Well, over the past couple of days, China's Xi Jinping and China's foreign minister took aim directly at the United States. Now, this is something they never do. In fact, they usually remain really diplomatic and only use neutral terms like some other nations when they're referring to anything negative, but not today. Instead, Xi Jinping said, quote, Western countries led by the U.S. have implemented all-round containment, encirclement, and suppression against us, bringing unprecedentedly severe challenges to our country's development. Those are really strong words. Encirclement, entrapping, right? I mean, these are very, very. I mean, you might as well just say, they're complete. It's a blockade. With us now is Caleb Maupin, journalist and political analyst. Caleb, welcome to the show.
Sure, glad to be here.
First of all, so the first criticism of this that people would claim is that the reason why China's Xi Jinping is making these statements and the reason why the foreign minister today, so China's Xi Jinping said it yesterday, foreign minister said quite a few statements today, which actually, we actually have a video of the foreign minister. Let's hear what he had to say first before we start talking about this, because it's escalating every day. Here's the foreign minister.
中国的外交有足够的厚道与善意，但当豺狼当道、恶狼来袭时，中国的外交官必须与狼共舞，保家卫国。
Yeah, so China's diplomacy has enough kindness and goodwill, but when wolves attack, Chinese diplomats must dance with wolves, defend the country. He went on in this and said, the U.S. claims to outcompete China, but not seek conflict. In reality, this so-called competition of the United States is all-round containment and suppression, which is a zero-sum game of life and death. Really strong words. That's like war. He says, I will first quote two sentences from the preamble of the Constitution of the People's Republic of China. Taiwan is part of the sacred territory of the People's Republic of China. It is the sacred duty of all Chinese people, including Taiwan compatriots, to complete the great cause of reunification of the motherland. So really strong statements coming from both Xi and from the foreign minister. The criticism is the reason they're actually coming out and making these statements now is because Xi Jinping is in hot water. Things aren't going so great at home. People are financially struggling. China, people are saying, oh, China's going to be going bankrupt in the next couple of months. I've heard these sorts of things. And so he's feeling the pressure. So he's just looking to place blame somewhere, a scapegoat. What do you make of that?
Well, there's a lot that I could respond to there. I think China is responding to real threats that have been made against them. When you have the U.S. Congress telling a Chinese corporation not build a new factory to make computer chips to sell in China because somehow this is a threat to U.S. power, that's ridiculous. I mean, you look at what's going on the Korean Peninsula now, these very provocative drills rehearsing the all-out destruction of North Korea right on China's border. And you look at the way, there's this talk of free competition. Huawei makes better phones than the United States. That's pretty clear. They make way better phones than iPhones, way better phones than American manufacturers do. And so instead of, American companies just upping their competition, they try to squash Huawei. This is the approach the United States is having, and China is responding. But as far as that last thing you mentioned about China's economy is about to collapse, I've been hearing that my whole life, and so have you. I mean, our whole life, China's just about to fall. It's just about to collapse. I remember back in 2015 when the Chinese stock market tanked. Do you remember that? And a week later, it was right back up. Because at the end of the day, all that had to happen was the Chinese Communist Party made some phone calls. They outlawed short selling on the threat of arrest. And then the Chinese stock market was right back up because the market really doesn't have the power in China. The Communist Party does. And that's what the recent meeting was about. I mean, the two sessions, that's where the People's Political Consultative Committee and the National People's Assembly, they gather, and it's about setting the economic agenda for the year. That is what the communist leaders are there doing. They are planning out the economy. They're there to make sure that the living standards continue to rise. They haven't seen the economic fallout from COVID that was expected, and they are predicting projecting a pretty strong GDP growth in the coming year. So I think that's the context here. The United States is trying to suppress China's economy because it's a competitor.
I agree with you that that is actually the real root of this issue completely. I agree that fundamentally what happened was that China is a communist country, the United States is a capitalist country, and the communists used capitalism against the capitalists, right? They came along and they said, oh, you have pretty much everything for sale, so we'll buy it. Why not? I mean, if we can invest in your companies, we can buy land, we can buy some of the most prominent buildings in the United States. We could buy your entertainment industry. They own, I'm not sure what they own today and if they've divested, but I know that they were like Legendary Entertainment, AMC movie theaters, the Waldorf Astoria in New York, hundreds of acres of farmland in the United States. They own a lot. And again, they own investments. A lot of companies are building products in China. They don't want to lose that labor. And so China essentially said, okay, well, you guys are up for sale. We'll buy it. And then when the U.S. turned around and said, well, then you should be up for sale, China said, no, that's not the way we do it. We're not putting ourselves up for sale. If you want to do business in our country, here are the parameters. We still own it. You can have 49%, up to 49%. You have to give us the patents. You have to do all of these things. And that was considered unfair. However, that being said, I do think that these are fighting words that China's using right now. And this is not just about economics anymore for them, it seems. I mean, they are using language, containment, encirclement, suppression. Like I said, they might as well say blockade. And once you say blockade, that's war, right? Same thing with wolves. We've got to dance with wolves, or saying life and death. I mean, these are fighting words. Do you think China is now thinking, I guess the only way is to fight our way out of this? If they're not going to play the game of economics with us and compete, as you're mentioning, which I agree, that's what the U.S. needs to do. The U.S. needs to say, rather than just using military might, the U.S. instead needs to say, time to compete with an economic powerhouse that has risen largely off of our economy. But it happened. It's done. Okay, can't cry over spilt milk. It's over, right? We have to move on. We have to move forward. But I don't know. This sounds like they might be gearing up to I'm military. I mean, what do you think of that? Do you think that's a possibility?
Well, first of all, we have to understand the context here, which is that when China was a deeply poor country, which is not very long ago, I mean, it's not very long ago that China was the sick man of Asia, mass malnutrition related deaths all the time, mass illiteracy. Before China developed and rose itself up out of poverty, the way it was kept poor was by keeping it divided. Right? You had Tibet in one area, you had a government, central government that wasn't being recognized, you had regions where warlords had power, and that part of the point that the Chinese Communist Party is always making is that they have held the country together. Deng Xiaoping said before the communists came to power, China was a heap of loose sand, but they brought the country together and they've held it together. So what the United States is doing with Taiwan, increasingly getting closer to forces that consider Taiwan to not be part of China. What the USA has done with the Uyghur separatists and with the Tibet separatist groups, with the Hong Kong stuff, this is all a threat to the Chinese Communist Party because their maintaining of credibility depends on them making clear we have held this country together. We have held this country together, and we, as a civilization that goes back 5,000 years, we're stronger when we're together. And when we're divided, when we're separated into different territories and regions, that's when we get poorer. And that's something that is a little bit difficult for us to understand. We have more of a Western Atlanticist worldview. We think in terms of the British Empire and seabound trade routes, but this is about Eurasia. And in Eurasia, where you have great land masses, territories are stronger when they are together, when they're trading with each other, when they're developing. And that's the context that the Chinese Communist Party is seeing this. They see the United States as trying to pull their country apart. And in response to that, they are ready to defend themselves. And they feel they've been attacked. Look, I mean, I don't have to break this down for you. I'm sure your audience knows it. But, China has 1 overseas military base. Russia has 8. The United States has well over 1,000. China, there have been military conflicts, but nothing compared to what the United States has been doing around the world. I mean, if you look at the number of U.S. military bases all throughout the Pacific, et cetera, China is not the one that's the aggressor in this confrontation, I don't think.
No, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's